Okay, here we are. President Marcos Jr. on his nth travel. But in fairness, I am with him on this one. I'm not sure about the Grand Prix. I was just in Singapore the other day. And medyo half-jokingly na yung mga iba na regular customer na nila si Bongbong Marcos every year. I said, don't take that for granted. Mas type pa niya siguro yung Monaco kasi Singapore is high level, but there's even higher than Singapore. But anyway, he's going now to a country which is even wealthier than Singapore, and that's letter S also, and that's Saudi Arabia. But obviously, Saudi Arabia right now is a very, very important country because it's becoming a very active geopolitical player. Not long ago, we were hearing about even talks potentially between Saudi Arabia and Israel for normalization, which could have become a political earthquake, a geopolitical earthquake. But all of that is obviously out of the window. Now, the last time we talked, Secretary Llamas, it was freshly out of the horrible massacres and that even claimed the lives of some of our kababayans by militant groups who burst into Israel. But as we talk right now, thousands of civilians have been killed in Gaza, including a lot of children. And words like war crimes are coming out. You know, even inside Israel, people are attacking Netanyahu. I mean, suddenly European Union, Norway, Ireland are talking more critically. So the mood has dramatically changed just in a week because the response to the attacks on Israel last week for many people is not proportionate at all. And for some people, it has way crossed the line. So you have China, Vietnam, Russia, Indonesia, Malaysia, Turkey, Brazil, many of these countries coming out and emphasizing the rights of the Palestinian people, the need for a just peace. So with all of that happening, a part of me is wondering, nasaan bang Pilipinas? Because obviously, Pilipinas malapit sa Amerika. President Marcos met the envoy from Israel, dahil namatay, of course, yung mga kababayan natin, maraming galit mga Pilipino. I completely understand that. My understanding also is that maybe this is time for the Philippines also to listen to the rest of the global South and look at it from a bigger picture, which is if we want to protect the interests of OFWs, if we want to be one of the pillars of the global South, we have to have a balanced approach, which is beyond just, tit for tat, but looks at a just, lasting solution to the Palestine Arab-Israeli conflict, right? I mean, and my sense is sana President Marcos Jr. will step up the diplomatic game as he goes to Riyadh. Because his father, right? I mean, you and I are not fan of Marcos Sr. when it comes to human rights and economy, but his father was a global South leader, right? If you look at his speeches in the Afro-Asia summits, he was one of the founders of Asean. I was just talking to my Singaporean friends the other day, and you know what my Singaporean friends were telling me, Ronald? They were saying, for a long time, we Singaporeans had to punch well above our weight because medyo malabo yung mga kasabay natin. Pero now, as Indonesia comes into form, becomes a major power, is speaking out, and they're hoping Philippines also steps up because Singapore is also going through its transition right now. There could be a new leader, new prime minister soon. So parang sinasabi nila, wag na kayo masyadong umasa sa amin. Maliit lang kaming bansa. We're just a city-state. We cannot carry the water. So actually, they feel embarrassed when everyone is expecting Singapore. So he was asking me, kamusta naman kayo dyan sa Pilipinas? And I was saying, actually, in theory, Marcos Jr. could continue his father's legacy on one thing good, and that one thing good is on foreign policy, including itong leadership within the global South. So Ronald, I mean, this is not the conversation you usually hear in Philippines, right? I mean, this is something very different. This is a very global Filipino way of thinking about it. So I wanted to get your point of view on this.
Well, I was able to visit Israel and Palestine several times. As a guest of the former Prime Minister Shimon Peres, which was the leader of the Labour Party of Israel, and as a guest of Fatah, the party of Yasser Arafat.
In West Bank, where there is no Hamas, just to be clear. So because people think Hamas is everywhere. Hamas is just in Gaza. West Bank
There's a lot of different groups in Palestine.
Exactly. That's people forget. Everyone says Hamas. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was there several times. I even met Arafat in Lisbon in 1999. So may kaunti akong insights dun sa nangyayari doon, no? Even way before the present dynamics, no? yesterday I attended a forum about the issue of Gaza, organized by Centro, a trade union center. Ang speaker nila ay si Marie ng Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, the new resident, no, who lived and worked in
Used
Israel.
to be there, in Tel Aviv.
For several years. So talagang hirap eh. Hirap na dahil una, this is historical, no? And to a great extent, it's not directly the fault of the Israelis and the Palestinians, no? It's about old colonizers, no?
Britain,
like the
UK.
British, which arbitrarily divided the Middle East, no, into unsustainable countries, no, which to a great extent are the roots of the present crisis, the present conflicts in most of the Middle East right now, including.
And of course,
Israel and
sorry. Let's just be clear. So the British messed it up big time, just like they did in India and the whole India-Pakistan again. But also the Holocaust with Nazi Germany. So Europe has a lot of historical responsibility for this mess that our Jewish and Muslim and Christian brothers, Christians because they're Palestinians or Christians too, but people forget, right? So in a way, this is a kind of everyone is a victim of the colonial legacy also here and the horrible Holocaust that happened under Nazi Germany. So we have to be clear about, first of all, that because people think this is an ancient war between Muslims and Jews for thousands. That's not true. This is a product of Western colonization and Nazi Germany Holocaust. This is why we're in this very difficult situation right now.
Yes. We have to understand that Christianity, Islam, Judaism are all came from the Abrahamic religion or culture, whatever we call it. No, so historically, spiritually, they're not supposed to be antagonistic to each other, but was really complicated because of the history, because of the politics, because of the colonizers in the past. So it's not a black and white issue. That is why even itong present na gera, ang hirap i-navigate to create a common position. For example, like us progressives. No? Even progressive groups around the world are debating intensely about this. Even your school, Harvard, is debating about this intensely. No? At wala akong nakikita na pinakamaayos na positioning. Positioning. Huwag natin kalimutan, even prime ministers in Israel ay ina-assassinate ng mga right-wing political forces in Israel. So hindi mo pwedeng sabihin na yung Israel is a monolithic country with a clear anti-Palestinian sentiment. No, yun yung At ikalawa ay medyo naging complicated for us because we have 50 to 100,000 Filipino overseas workers there, no? Na in varying degrees, no, are very welcome to the Israelis at medyo galit yung mga Palestinians for allegedly taking their jobs, no, nung sila ay pinaalis sa kanilang mga trabaho. So nagkakaroon ng nadadagdagan yung complication, no, for us Filipinos, not only between Palestine and Israel, no. Tingin ko definitely we have to condemn the attack of Hamas on civilian populations, no. The inhumanity done to babies.
There's no debate, right? We're against any indiscriminate, deliberate violence against civilians. I think there's no debate about that, right? Just to be clear, because there are a lot of
with us, but even some of our members in the progressive movement here, no, ay hindi, para sa kanila, parang they never mentioned the attack of Hamas on kibbutz, on the concert, no? Parang everything dito ay kasalanan ng Israel, no? Some of the friends,
namatay yung mga kababayan natin. Namatay yung mga kababayan natin. We cannot, I'm saying.
Some of the friends, hindi ko na sila babanggitin. Because mga kaibigan natin yan, no? Mga political organizations here. Kung babasahin mo yung statement nila, no mention of the attack. No mention of the barbarity done to the women, no, to the children, to the babies, no. Walang kahit anong ganon. At the same time, yung iba natin namang mga kaibigan, no, ay parang Israel is the only victim. Israel is the only victim.
And like Palestinian lives are not equal human life. Like they're not like if when
Exactly.
I think something about Palestinian children and all suddenly nagwawala yung iba. And my point is like
Exactly.
so mali to point out that Palestinians are also human beings and that their lives should not be
when I
forgotten.
was there,
That's
I saw firsthand how Palestinians were treated in the wall when they entered the wall. Talagang
this is West Bank, right? This is West Bank, not Gaza.
Yes.
Hamas dun, just to be clear.
Yes.
Exactly.
Meron din, but not that big. No, meron din, no. Yung collective punishment sa Gaza at sa West Bank, yung pag merong isa na na-involve sa attack on Israel, buong pamilya i-evict at wawasakin yung bahay, yung ganong klaseng collective punishment. That is what is happening now in Gaza. That is collective punishment on a bigger scale. Diba? Kaya very delicate yung positioning. I think we have to condemn Hamas, no? But we also have to criticize and condemn yung ginagawa ngayon ng Israel dun sa civilian population ng Gaza. There was even this very tragic story of one family na nakinig dun sa call for evacuation ng Israel. Pumunta sila allegedly do sa safe area at namatay yung buong pamilya, 20 of them, no, one big family, no, because they obeyed Israel to evacuate. They did. At nung pumunta sila doon sa allegedly safe zone, all of them died.
You mean from north to south, right? From north to south.
Yeah. So ito ay dapat talaga i-document, ito ay dapat talaga isa-isahin, no? Dahil it's not a simple issue. No? It is collective punishment on a grander scale. And you have our ex-president saying that Netanyahu should transform Gaza into the biggest cemetery in the world. Did you hear that? Did you hear your
yes,
your
that's
idol?
why I missed his other statement on West Philippine Sea and giving water and all. Kasi parang I was so shocked by I mean, not shocked because I shocked in a sense that I mean, isn't this the president who's supposed to talk about Muslim, Christian unity and, you know,
but he's a psychopath.
The first moral president. Yeah, I mean, that just tells you this guy was not fit to be the president.
We elected the psychopath. So.
He's not fit to be the president. I'm sorry. I'm just saying. He's not fit to be the president, but the mistake happened. What can we do? But sana we learn our lessons and it just tells you how out of touch he is. No, for someone who's supposed to be anti-West and all of that. Look at statements of his own idols or boss. China. China's position is absolutely clear. Let me read what China has said on this, no? Kasi I just had an article on that. Kasi siguro si Tatay Digong sana nag-clear siya dun sa mga amo niya, no? Bago siya nagsalita kasi nagkakalat-kalat na naman siya dito. I mean, in China, very clear sila na they're friends of both Palestine and Israel, but the root cause of the problem should not be forgotten. This is both Wang Yi, right? Both their foreign minister and also yung special envoy nila sa I'm just trying to bring out the exact quote, no? Para lang si Tatay mukhang hindi nagre-reach. Ito yung sinabi ni Zhai Jun, who's the Chinese special envoy on the Middle East. Ito yung sinabi niya. As a friend to both Israel and Palestine, what we hope to see is the two countries living together in peace. The key to achieving that lies in the realization of the two-state solution and establishment of independent state of Palestine. More interestingly is Chinese Wang Yi, who had a conversation with the Saudi Arabian counterpart just last week, and he said, China believes that the historical injustices against Palestine have lasted for more than half a century and cannot go on. Accordingly, he said, China stands ready to work with Saudi Arabia and Arab countries to continue supporting the Palestinians' just cause of restoring their national rights. Mukhang yung kanilang bata sa Pilipinas ay hindi updated dun sa kanilang amo. So that's how out of touch he is, because China right now is the one championing the rights of the Palestinian people. And yung bata nila, yung barangay chairman dyan, kung ano nung pinagsasabi nagkakalat dyan.
At least pumayag na ibigay yung tubig sa China. Huwag lang yung isda.
Wag natin po, medyo seryoso pa tayo, Ronald. Balikan natin yan. I just alam mo, speaking of collective punishment, it's like dahil ganito yung presidente mo dati, dahil digong ang presidente mo, lahat tayo papunish ng mundo. Sasabihin nila, lahat ng Pinoy katulad ni... You see, that's how stupid collective punishment can be.
Yeah.
Because may 16 million na bumoto kay Digong, yung 80 million na hindi bumoto are naturally responsible for everything that tatay does. That's
Yeah.
a collective punishment, right? Like,
Yes.
that's the logic how it operates.
Yes. At tingin ko, Richard, what we can do, we can unite most of the progressive movement. Halimbawa, on the issue of a humanitarian corridor. Di ba? Tingin ko kahapon may debate na doon sa paggamit ng salitang terror. No? Even that is divisive. No? Even yung two-state solution is no longer viable, no? As a framework. No? Yun yung dahil Hamas has rejected that. No? And Fatah is so weak.
Yeah, they're not in a position to even negotiate.
To be of significance. So, medyo yung two-state solution na pareho nang ni-reject, no? At even marami sa Palestinian ay tinawag na traitor si Arafat because of that two-state solution, no? Kaya hindi ko alam kung ano yung framework
the whole
ngayon.
Oslo Accords and everything.
Yeah. Ano ngayon yung framework? No? Ano ngayon yung framework for at least to start the talks, no? Yun yung hindi mahanap doon sa dalawang forum na inattendan ko this past few days, no? Na kasama rin ako doon sa discussion sa Progressive Alliance, no? Hirap na hirap din because the Progressive Alliance have 2 members from Israel and 2 members from Palestine, no? Yun yung kaya hindi sila hanggang ngayon walang posisyon ang Progressive Alliance, no? about this.
Yeah, Rona, I think you and I have correctly discussed how the left and progressives have to figure out how to deal with the 21st century, because I think some people are still stuck in the 20th century and whataboutism. Our position is neither nor, no? Wrongs don't make it right. So categorically we're against deliberate attack on any civilian. You're Jew, you're Christian, Muslims, I don't care. It's wrong. Okay, so I think that's what you and I are standing. That's why we can have this conversation. Because if your position was different, mag-ahoy talaga tayo dito. But friendly, in a friendly way, as friendly as I can get. Although you can say I'm passionate about this issue on many levels. No, but going back to this, let's talk about the Philippine government, right? We have millions of Filipinos in the Persian Gulf region, Saudi Arabia, Emirates, Bahrain, Oman, etc. We have thousands of Filipinos from Lebanon to Syria, despite everything, Jordan, and the fear is this could spread. If this, I mean, I'm in Malaysia right now, Ronald, no? The emotions is very strong. In fact, nung pauwi ako sa Singapore, yung driver ng taxi was Malaysian Singaporean, and he was watching Al Jazeera, which was showing the bias of the media and all of that. And I had to reassure him, don't worry, I understand where, because he was wondering, baka, I'm the Western guy, or I have to reassure him, I'm not Western, right? So I can see how this resonates. And we had the leader of prayers in Saudi Arabia, I think Mecca, who was crying when he was discussing. I mean, this is a strong emotional issue for more than 1 billion Muslims around the world. So no matter how friendly governments in, I don't know, Morocco or whatever want to be with Israel, on the streets, tensions are building up. People are asking for response, no? And this is, the more civilians also die in Gaza, more than 2,000 already, based on some reports, the more they'll be called for something drastic to be done. And I'm worried about the situation. And meron tayong millions of Filipinos in the Middle East, a lot of them in the Arab world, right? So if this spreads, let's say Hezbollah joins from the north, and next thing you know, if in Jordan, the Palestinians, I mean, half of population of Jordan are Palestinians, right? I mean, this can get, and then there's the West Bank. I mean, my God, this can get really out of control. I don't want to be panicky about this, but as someone who understands the Middle East, has written a book on the region, follows it, this can get out of control. So
that's why Richard, I'm intensely watching and observing Hezbollah, because Hezbollah
they're the
is
powerful one.
definitely much stronger than Hamas.
Yeah.
more well armed than Hamas, more rockets. No, I think they even have real missiles, not just the
Yeah.
homemade ones of
And they beat
Hamas. No,
Israel in
yeah,
2006.
and they're having skirmishes with Israel, and they're so silent, as if they're preparing for something. No,
Yeah.
they're
It's
more
very,
scary if they're
when they're
silent.
silent, exactly. Like
Yeah,
yun
you
nga
know.
eh. Yun nga eh. Actually, if they were just saying things like, okay, but when people go silent, that's where I get
Yeah.
scared, right? Because the Hamas one were silent too before the
Yes.
horrible things
Yes.
happened. So
Too
so
silent.
I
That's why sa akin, from my vantage point,
yeah.
Hezbollah is the trigger for a bigger Middle East
It's
conflict.
gonna be all, yeah, it's gonna be
Yeah,
major all
yeah,
around.
yeah,
Everyone is gonna be
yeah,
involved. So it's gonna get really, really scary. And then you could
yeah.
have a situation whereby governments in Arab world are gonna stand on one way, but the people are gonna be on the other way. Then that's also a crazy situation, right? Um now
And we have 3 to 4 million Filipinos in depending on how you count them in the Middle
exactly
East.
exactly. So um
Oh,
and this is also where our oil and gas comes from. So if you care about inflation in the Philippines, God forbid something happens there. Ang dami natin reklamo sa inflation. Imagine how worse it could get if things really
yes.
go downhill there. So that's why the argument, and that's why we're having this episode, Ronald, is it's time for the Philippines to step up and work with Indonesia, with Saudi Arabia, with China, with Brazil, etc. Other countries who are saying, hey, it's not about taking sides. Of course, we should be against any act of terrorism, but this is also about pushing for a lasting, just solution to this problem. I think the Philippines has to be more forthcoming about that. Are you hearing something to that effect? Because for me, so far it's mostly about
Kagabi, kagabi kasama ko si Secretary Manalo sa Czech National Day.
right,
No?
right, right.
Pero parang wala pa silang nako-consolidate na posisyon dito. Hindi ko alam kung sino ang ating Middle East expert sa DFA. Si Ben Surto, I think is now our ambassador to Turkey.
Turkey.
No? Si Neil Imperial ay hindi na natin ambassador sa Israel, nailipat na siya sa Italy. So hindi ko na alam kung sino yung mga bagong na-assign dyan. Pero wala akong kilala na Middle East expert sa DFA. Well, wala rin naman tayo talagang malinaw na China expert sa DFA. No?
No, but I mean, someone who can work
Yeah.
with other countries. Remember the upcoming visit to Saudi Arabia, an ASEAN Arab summit, right? So there'll be Malaysia, there'll be Indonesia there, who have very strong stance against what's happening in Gaza. We have to work with these countries. We have to work with Singapore, Thailand, which also has many of their own version of OFWs. They have also overseas Taiwan. We have to work with fellow countries there. That's my point. Not only about Arab expertise or Middle East expertise. This is really about diplomacy, leadership.
Yeah. Dahil for a long time, natama naman, we are concerned for our OFWs.
Right.
But you cannot be concerned with the OFWs in a vacuum. Diba? You have to understand the context they are living in. No? Halimbawa, nung pumunta ako dito sa Israel at saka sa Palestine, hindi ko alam na we have 50 to 100,000 Filipinos there. Nagulat ako. Meron pala akong mga kamag-anak na nandun, no?
Right.
At yung mga kausap ko na Palestinians, ang medyo galit ng konti. Dahil nga marami sa kanila natanggal sa trabaho, no? Dahil ang tingin sa kanila ay terrorist, at marami sa pumalit ay mga Pilipino. I want to make this clear, no? Hindi yung mga trabahong nakuha ng Pilipino ay hindi lang mga trabaho ng Palestino. Halimbawa, domestic helpers. Hindi naman yung trabaho ng mga Palestinians.
They're not going to take those jobs.
Pero the image, it's about image. The image ay kinuha natin yung trabaho nila. No? At kahit ang kinuha natin is just a few thousand. No? Yung dating sa mga Palestinians ay we took their jobs. No? Ayun. Kaya nabo-blow out of proportion yung ating presence sa Israel. Yung presence natin sa West Bank or sa Gaza, I think 137
37, no? Yeah, evacuate na through the Rafah border, yeah.
Yes.
So we have to talk to
Pero sa Israel, marami Marami sa Israel.
50,000, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yung legal, no? But the other 50,000.
29. Yeah, officially.
Yeah. So, yun.
Yeah, you're right. Yun nga, parang Kasi napansin ko ganito, I think we're about to end this episode. Gusto ko magpahinga ka na rin. No, the thing kasi is, pagdating sa civil society, pagdating sa conferences, alam mo naman, lamang ang Pinoy, di ba? Mayabang tayo eh. Talaga madalang Pinoy Indians usually with some for it. Pero yung gobyerno natin parang hindi ganun eh. Very, I mean, magaling yung mga nasa DFA, but I think generally we lack that kind of, pizzazz, that kind of panache, no? Na parang yung level of, di ba, sa mga civil society meetings internationally, parating mga Pinoy ay front and center, di ba? Ang galing ng Pinoy. Pero pagdating sa international diplomacy, very, very diffident, I think, sometimes tayo. Even if napakagaling talaga yung mga diplomats natin. I know them personally, a lot of them. We have Yusek De Vega, who's fantastic, brilliant guy.
Weird lang.
Yeah, I mean, Gaza, she's fantastic. But I think generally, dahil nga medyo, dahil medyo ipit tayo, dahil sa vulnerabilities natin and all, and dahil siguro kulang ng signal from above, from the president and all, medyo masyadong cautious, I think. I mean, matapang ang DFA ngayon sa West Philippine Sea, which is good. Right? Yes. But I think it has to go beyond that. We are 13th largest country by population, right? So we should act as a top 15 countries in the world, and we should be one of the top 10 global South leaders for that matter, and one of the top 3 leaders in ASEAN, along with Indonesia and Singapore, something like that, right? I mean, this should come natural to us, right? And for some reason, we're always seen as, America's friends in Asia. American side na yan. So kung ano America side, yan na yung side nila. So I think we have to push back against that because that's not helpful, and it's creating unnecessary tension or dismissiveness. As a Filipino, I can feel that when I say, no, of course you're pro-American guy. They cannot tell that to me because they know I'm very critical about US, but they can say, but yeah, Richard, but you're unique, right? I always tend to get that. So parang my sense is we have to push that, no, Ronald?
Yeah. Ako naman yung magtatanong sa iyo, Richard, no? Anong ibig mo sabihin ng Global South? Dahil in a multipolar world, even the Global South appears multipolar, no? Halimbawa, pinagmamalaki ng China na Brazil is in their ambit. I think that's not totally true, no? In terms of trade, perhaps yes. In terms of exports or imports of soybean from Brazil, I think that's true, no? The main beneficiary of the BRI in Latin America is Brazil, but still Brazil won't agree to the kind of political system in China. They won't agree to the issues in the South China Sea, in the West Philippine Sea, no? So hindi siya ganun kasimple, no? South Africa is close to Russia, no? Dahil during apartheid, most of them were hiding in Russia. Most of them were being supported by Russia. But in terms of political system, I think they're very far away from the autocratic Russian political system. India is close to Russia like China, but definitely India is very critical of China. So you cannot call them as part and parcel of the Global South. So it's medyo hindi ganun ka-accurate pag sinabi natin na the Global South is like this. No, the Global South is closer to China and Russia, no, farther from the West. No?
Thank you for that. But as you can see, I anticipated that. So as I wrote in my op-ed today, sa Philippine Daily Inquirer, I said, in fairness, both concepts of the West and Global South can be at times misleading. I'm using exactly. Thanks to the immense diversity of views and interests, especially in the developing world. Not to mention our East Asian nations such as Japan, Western, or check, for instance, Ireland and Norway, very different take on the recent conflict in the Middle East and far more critical of what's happening in Gaza. Nevertheless, ang argument ko kasi dito is there are some least common denominators that Global South countries share, right? The same way that there are least common denominators that the so-called West share. I mean, the least common denominator for the West is that they have to be liberal democratic societies, right? Kaya even when they have an Orban or Trump, they try to squeeze those guys in. I mean, you have those pictures of Trump on one side, the rest of G7 on the other, right? So there's some lists. I think on the Global South, it's not true that we're with China. A lot of us were very critical of Russia. But at the same time, I think in the Global South, one thing that we all have in common is that since we are still poor and developing countries, we're much more cautious about picking fights or joining sanctions regime, right? That's why very few Asian countries joined the sanctions regimes against Russia, even though they didn't like what happened to Ukraine. And at the same time, let me be very clear about this, Ronald. I mean, let's be honest, whether you're Brazilian, Filipino, I sense this, you know, I mean, when I'm in a conference, when our Western counterparts, when I say West, mostly Anglo-America, really, right? A little bit with Germany and France. So Norwegians, Irish, quite different, right? You know, sometimes when they say something, medyo nagtitinginan kami ng iba in a sense that, for instance, they talk about rules-based order. It's like, whose rules? What order? Like before Ukraine, there was wars in Libya, Afghanistan, Iraq. Didn't that count? But suddenly after Ukraine is invaded, they suddenly talk about the rules-based order. So, you know, and then there's also this idea of it's like you know, when some person of Caucasian background, something happens to them, the coverage is all over the place. But have you noticed, Ronald, how much coverage was given to the Filipinos who were massacred in Israel, right? Or Thai citizens. You know what I'm saying? Like there's so much in a systemic prejudice and structural prejudice there that it's hard not to notice if you're from Brazil, South Africa, Philippines, or even Singapore's of this world, if you're not part of the quote-unquote West. So much so that I think even Japan, which is supposed to be part of G7, they also sometimes feel they're not fully Western, and that's why they also have a different... You get what I'm saying? Like there's certain least common denominators, which I think whether you're Chinese, whether you're Brazilian, whether you're Filipino, can agree upon because of our colonial history, because of some things that we experience that your average, I don't know, British, American, or German doesn't experience. Do you get what I'm saying? And then they have these certain narratives that I think is very Eurocentric and tends to forget what you mean rules-based order. How can you talk about rules-based order when millions died in Iraq and Afghanistan and Libya? Look at the mess happened there. So I think when I say global South, there is some common denominator. There's kumbaga kung may Venn diagram yon, you're right. There's so much diversity. I said that. There are issues where we are totally against China, right? And Brazil is against Russia. But if you draw a Venn diagram, there is some significant degree of overlap in our experiences and sense of vulnerabilities that I think we can bring together. And I think if you look, as I said, Turkey, Brazil, India, China, I can go on and on. Most of these countries, all of them were clear. There has to be a just peace solution to this, that you shouldn't also forget the lives and the rights of Palestinians. You don't see that balance in the statement of many Western countries, with the exception of Norway, Ireland, or Japan, for instance, right? So this is what I'm talking about. So you're absolutely right. It doesn't mean we're monolithic. It doesn't mean we have 100% overlap. China is our rival, if not enemy, on West Philippine Sea. But in a way, we're all developing countries with certain very dark, traumatic experiences. And you know, when you go to US, suddenly all of us are Asians worrying about anti-Asian racism, for instance, right? Do you get what I'm saying? So I'm talking about those common denominators where we can work together while acknowledging we're not the same on the same page 100% of the time. We're not. We're definitely not. So that's the context of the global South I'm talking about. But Ronald, I mean, don't you also feel it? I mean, you have lived a little bit longer than me so far on Earth, right? So I mean, don't you also sense that the world is changing a little bit? I mean, my sense is during my dad's time, if you're not white or from the West, you will feel it more that you're second-class citizen in the world. Nowadays, parang mas cool maging Asian, right? I mean, even if some of us could pass as half white or, you know, you rather say you're Asian because this is dynamism. This is where history is happening. Are you feeling that? Have you noticed that, Ronald? Because I know
partly dahil sabi mo nga, the least common denominator dito sa Global South ay yung ating common history under colonialism. Diba? Yun yung isang minimum least common denominator. No? Ako lang ay minsan nag-react ako dun sa reductionism na itong BRICS is the Global South. Itong BRI, no? Itong BRI na ngayon ay nagagather sa Beijing, this is the Global South. No? Yung minsan doon ako nag-react. Not you, yung ibang mga groups is calling them
Bakery Forum. Yung Bakery Forum, BRICS, pareho.
Yeah, tawag nila this is the new Global South. Doon ako nag-react, no? Because there's nothing global Southy about this. No? Ayun yung. Kaya sa akin
it's very China Empire thing. It's a China Empire thing.
Yun yung
No, I completely agree with you, Ken. I'm very
yeah.
so obviously on West Philippine Sea issue, we're gonna have many disagreements with fellow developing countries who are closer to China than us, right? Um, uh, so I completely agree with you. We're not 100% on the same board, but yes, our past colonial experience, our struggles with structural prejudice, with being treated as second-class citizens of this world for so long. I'm not saying it's fault of every, I don't know, Western person, but this is legacy of centuries of colonialism. But now suddenly, if you're from India, you're from Brazil, you're from Turkey, and hopefully from Philippines, etc., you're gonna feel that, hey, maybe we have a little bit of more of a voice, because most of the institutions that we see today, IMF, World Bank, whatever, we didn't have much of a say, right, in their establishment. They were really products of Western organ. So for a very long time, the so-called West, especially Anglo-America or the Anglo-Saxon world, had monopoly on global governance. I think that's going away. Now, that doesn't mean we'll jump to the Chinese boat, but to a certain degree, the rise of China has created a new reboot, reset. And I think in this reset, there's a room for us to carve out some voice, because I just feel we tried to have that voice when we had the Carlos P. Romulos of the world, but biglang punta ako kay Teddy Boy Locsin like magda-digress na ako eh. But you know what I'm saying, we don't need like overcompensating whatever type of people to have that voice. I think we can have that voice by just acknowledging that the world is in transition. Doesn't mean that Asia will be the next superpower necessarily, but is that Asia should not necessarily be a second class or just second fiddle. Yun lang sinasabi ko dito, Ronald, no? But I perfectly agree. I don't like what others are doing. In fact, that's the reason why Indonesia did not join BRICS. Indonesia was invited to the BRICS Plus. They turned it down because they said, that's increasing the China club, right? And no, we want to join the OECD, which is the club of the really developed democratic countries. So you're absolutely right. And for me, I like the Indonesia way of doing things. And I think Indonesia could be kind of a role model for us because of so much similarities we have with them, in spite of some differences because we are a US treaty ally.
And even if India is in the BRICS, now I think the emerging dynamic in the world now, with the waning American superpower, I think in the near future it could be India and China.
Yeah, competing for influence here. Yeah, I mean, just on a very how should I, parang non-threatening. I mean, so since last year I've been traveling. The tourists I see more, they're Indians, middle-class Indians. In designer clothes and that. India is the new superpower in many ways. They're not rich yet. Problems, but they're a huge country and they're gonna flex their muscles. So this century is gonna look very different from what we used to be when I don't know, tiny Belgium or Switzerland could walk around as if they're a superpower. That's not gonna happen. It's gonna be really just China, India, Brazil, Saudi, Turkey, and hopefully the Philippines can find some sort of space there. I know we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, perhaps, but I don't know, Ronald, this is what I like. I mean, I think someone has to start this conversation. I mean, I'm very proud of getting this discussion on industrial policy a little bit sexier, because I don't think anyone was talking about industrial policy. And now I'm also in this kind of global South Philippine voice, but not a China-dominated global South, not a bakery forum kind of global, more of a reasonable, para sa bayan kind of global South. Maraming salamat, Ronald. Thank you so much.
Salamat din, Richard. No?
This was really fruitful. I think folks are enjoying. Marami na nagta-trash talk na. Pero sabi nga nung isa, bad ka, Ronald, bad ka. Keep it up, Ronald. Sir Ronald.
I'm evil. I'm not only bad, I'm evil.
Monster nga, di ba?
Especially with the jet ski.
And the jet ski, yeah. Wala akong sinabi dyan. Si Ronald dyan, please don't take it on. But my suggestion is maybe jet ski is an option for the vice president if he wants to push back against the other.
Richard.
Salamat. God bless.
See you.
Maraming salamat.
Enjoy